In the winter of 1923, German families discovered that burning banknotes was cheaper than using them to buy firewood. Not old bills, fresh wages. In one of the world's great industrial economies, cash itself had become kindling. A student ordered coffee for 5,000 marks. By the time he finished it, the next cup cost 7,000. Prices were doubling every 2 days. A wheelbarrow piled high with money could no longer buy a single newspaper. Employers surrendered to the math. Workers were paid 3 times a day, and wives raced the money to shops before prices moved. Children built forts from stacks of millions of marks, playing with more money than their grandparents earned in a lifetime. Farmers stopped selling food for paper. Riots broke out in the cities, and hungry townspeople marched out to loot the countryside. Yet, in the same ruined country, a small circle of men was quietly getting richer than ever. Remember them. In 1914, Germany had been a financial fortress. 1 American dollar cost just over 4 German marks. 9 years later, that same dollar cost over 4 trillion marks. This is the story of how money dies. It began with a bet. In 1914, Germany chose to pay for the First World War almost entirely by borrowing. France taxed its citizens to fight. Germany's leaders refused. New taxes might anger the public, but loans were nearly invisible. The plan assumed victory. Crush the enemy, annex their industry, and hand the entire war bill to the losers. Germany lost. By 1918, the government owed 156 billion marks, with no defeated enemy left to pay it. Then the victors sent their own invoice. The Treaty of Versailles demanded reparations in gold, hard cash, coal, and timber. In 1921, the bill was fixed. 50 billion gold marks payable on a strict schedule of quarterly deadlines. Gold marks. Real value. Germany's printing presses could produce paper by the ton, but they could not print gold. So the central bank tried something desperate. From August 1921, it bought foreign currency with paper marks at any price. Every purchase flooded the market with marks and pushed their value lower. But in Berlin, this looked less like madness than strategy. A dying mark screamed to the world that reparations were impossible, and it quietly erased Germany's own domestic war debts too. For a moment, the gamble held. In early 1922, the mark steadied at around 320 per dollar. Then, on a June morning in Berlin, gunfire tore into an open car carrying Germany's foreign minister, Walther Rathenau. Rathenau was brilliant, Jewish, and hated by the nationalist right. He was murdered by right-wing officers on his way to work. He had embodied something fragile, the belief that this young republic could negotiate its debts and somehow survive them. The markets understood instantly what had died with him. At his assassination, $1 cost 493 marks. 1 year later, a dollar cost 110,000 marks. Confidence, not gold, had been the mark's last anchor. Then came the invasion. In January 1923, French and Belgian troops occupied the Ruhr Valley, Germany's industrial heartland, to seize reparations directly. Berlin answered with passive resistance. Ruhr workers downed tools and refused to help the occupiers in any way. But striking workers still needed wages, and the government paid them the only way it could, by printing money. The presses now ran day and night, and Germany drowned in its own paper. The free fall had become vertical. A loaf of bread in Berlin cost 160 marks at the end of 1922. Less than a year later, that same loaf cost 200 billion marks. And by evening, sometimes more, banks gave up printing new bills and simply stamped extra zeros onto old ones. 30 paper mills ran around the clock. Money stopped being money. Cigarettes became Germany's real currency, stable, portable, and impossible to print. And here is where the story splits in two. If you had saved carefully your whole life, you were destroyed. Pensioners watched 40 years of careful saving shrink to the price of a single cup of coffee. But if you owed money, you walked free. Mortgages that once took decades were repaid with a single worthless bill. Hyperinflation was a seesaw. It did not destroy wealth evenly. It transferred it from careful savers to bold borrowers. Industrialists who borrowed heavily to build factories watched their debts evaporate, while the factories, the real things, remained. The cruelest twist. The middle class, who had done everything right, lost everything, while speculators dined in new mansions. When ordinary explanations fail people this badly, darker ones take root. Conspiracy theories spread through the ruins like weeds. The lie that Jews and foreign bankers had engineered the collapse moved from street corners into respectable drawing rooms. In Munich that autumn, a failed painter drew growing crowds by naming enemies. His party fed on every worthless banknote. That November, at hyperinflation's absolute peak, he marched on Munich in a failed coup. The beer hall putsch. The coup collapsed in a day. But draw one line from the worthless banknote to the prison cell where he wrote his book. Because when money can die, people learn a terrifying lesson. Every institution they trusted might be mortal too. By November 1923, the government faced two cliffs: keep printing and destroy the currency, or stop and destroy the state. The mark was beyond rescue. $1 now traded for 4.2 trillion marks. So how do you fix that? In October, Germany's answer arrived, and it was essentially a magic trick. Watch closely. No gold, no army, no foreign rescue. On the 15th of November 1923, a brand new currency appeared from nothing: the Rentenmark. Its backing was a legal fiction. Mortgages on Germany's farmland and factories, land that no ordinary person could ever actually redeem. One Rentenmark was declared equal to 1 trillion old marks. Shopkeepers simply wiped 12 zeros off their boards overnight. The real trick was discipline. The new bank flatly refused to print more, no matter how loudly the government begged. And for the first time in 9 years, the printing presses of Germany fell silent. The trick worked. Within weeks, prices stopped rising, markets calmed, and bread cost at dinner what it had at breakfast. By 1924, the exchange rate settled at 4.2 new marks per dollar, the exact ratio of 1914. Nothing physical had changed. No gold arrived, no debts were forgiven. Germans simply chose, together, to believe in money again. That is the secret 1923 revealed. Money was never really the paper, and never really the gold. Money is organized belief. But the rescue came too late for the savers, and the scars never fully healed. A generation remembered exactly whom it blamed. Within a decade, the man from the beer hall would take power. That, though, is the next story. Subscribe to see it.